In this video, I want to share two things that I've learned after traveling the world over the last, 5 years, between the age of about 24, 25 till about 29. Grew up in South Africa, African continent. I've lived in the UK and other places in Europe. I've lived in Asia, I've lived in Latin America, and now I'm in the US. So I've ticked off nearly all continents. In those 4 years, I've learned two very important things, and I'm going to share them with you today. So if you are someone in your 20s and you're thinking about whether you should go and travel the world, this will definitely help you make that decision. Straight after uni, I thought I would book a one-way ticket to the UK because I thought it was a good idea at the time. And, start from scratch to see what it was like to go and travel, maybe get a job in the meantime, support myself, easy going. I got there and it was one of the hardest experiences that I ever had because I came there with a sense of arrogance. Growing up in South Africa, I feel like South Africa is very segregated from the world. So we think as South Africans, we think we're the shit, right? We're big fish in a small pond. So I went there with a sense of arrogance, and I was abruptly reminded that when you travel and you start from nothing, it doesn't matter how well qualified you are, doesn't matter who you are essentially nothing in the grand scheme of things. And that is the first lesson that I learned. Traveling and starting from scratch is the greatest equalizer in the world because no one cares about you and you realize you are a very, very small fish in a very, very big pond, as opposed to if you don't travel. And why I say this is because a lot of the time when I go back to South Africa and I speak to people who are maybe from my university or from my school and they haven't actually traveled, they haven't worked abroad, they haven't lived abroad, there's still this sense of arrogance. And I can tell that they haven't traveled because they still have this sense of arrogance. They think they're a big fish in a small pond. And they don't have that sense of knowing of what it's really like to be in the big world. One of my fondest memories when traveling was getting to the UK. Well, not fondest, it was actually probably one of my most horrible but most memorable memories, was thinking that I was going to get a job quite easily. I was quite well qualified. I had a few qualifications from university in South Africa, up to masters, which is ahead of most people. And I thought, getting a job in the UK is going to be piece of cake. Who's not going to want me to work for them? Again, it was a horrible reminder that no one cared. I could barely get a job pouring alcohol. I could barely get a job in bars. I could barely get a job serving tables, right? Because there was so much competition. The only thing anyone really ever cared about was experience. And obviously, if you've just left university, you haven't really got any experience with anything, no one wants to employ you. So that was a very harsh reminder that you are just so small in the grand scheme of things. That was the first thing that I learned when traveling. Number two, and this is the greatest, this was the best thing that ever happened to me. When you grow up in a small town or even a city, it doesn't really matter. You have people around you and you grow up with those people. They learn to know who you are. They learn to understand who you are. They know who you are as a person, what you do, what your characteristics are, etc., etc. And so therefore, if you try and develop, if you try and become more confident, if you try and start something new, a lot of the time we have this crabs in a bucket effect where if you try and elevate yourself, a lot of the people will start pulling you down. The reason for this is because they know what you're like. They know who you are, like I've said before. So therefore, you'll start hearing things like, why are you doing that? This is so not like you. This is so unlike your character. And one of the great things that I found when I was traveling was that there's absolutely none of that. Very similarly, when I went to university, it was the same thing because no one at university knew who I was in comparison to, for example, school. So you have the ability to create a new version of you. You have the ability to take on characteristics that maybe you haven't had the ability to do before. Maybe you haven't had the courage to do that before because you've always been thinking, what will John say? What will Matthew say or whoever, right? They might think I'm weird for doing this thing or trying out this new thing. And you have absolutely none of that when you travel, right? You create your new character wherever you are. You take on new values, you take on new behaviors. And the thing is, if people around you don't know who you are and you just start acting like this new person, they just think, oh, that's just him. that's him. And then they start treating you like that person. And then you have the complete opposite effect taking place. Whereas before, maybe if you hadn't left your home country, if you hadn't left your town, if you hadn't left your city, you have the effect where people place this framework, they place this cage on you to be a certain way. Now you have the opposite effect where people are actually letting you be who you want to be. So they encourage this new behavior, they encourage this new person that you are. And that was number 2, which was creating a new version of who you are. That was the most important thing that I found when I traveled. It gave me massive amounts of confidence that I would never have gained if I'd stayed in my home country. So I'm massively grateful for that. So, to address the first question that I posed at the beginning of this video, which was, should you travel in your 20s, early 20s to late 20s, it's probably the most important thing that one can do in that period of time, because you still have time to mess up. After 30, you need to start taking life a lot more seriously. The reason for that, maybe you've got a girlfriend, maybe you're thinking about starting a family. You can't just go and pack up shop and travel for 3 months and not worry about finances, or live on ramen noodles and, live in hostels. You can't really do that after 30. Well, you can, but it's not advised. If you actually want to get ahead in life, you need to start as early as possible. So absolutely, it's probably the most important thing. And it is the thing that I would attribute the most growth that I've had in my whole life. It would be to traveling. 100% it would be to traveling, for these 2 reasons. The first is that it is the great equalizer. It really puts you in your place, which is a good thing, because then you can act from a realistic standpoint. And secondly, it allows you to create the person that you want to create. So I would 100% recommend it. Also, I know this is a very short, not a lot of effort put into this video in terms of editing and B-roll and stuff like that. I haven't actually had time this week, but what I want to know from you, send me an email, journeyofles@gmail.com, or write it in the comments below. I want to know exactly what type of videos you want to see me produce on this channel, and I will produce them. I am your servant on YouTube. Let me know in the comments or send me an email, like I said, journeyofles@gmail.com. I'll go through what those are and I'll get making those videos. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one next week, Sunday, 11 a.m. EST. And until then, peace.